Hi YouTube, Mike here, and today I'm going to do a video that I didn't think I'd ever make. Now, about a year ago when I started making these videos, I decided that I wouldn't do anything at all to do with the Beatles, and it's not really because I don't like the Beatles, uh, because I do. And at one time, back in the early '70s, I really loved the Beatles. But you look around YouTube, and there's so many people do Beatles stuff. There are whole channels devoted to the Beatles. So I thought, well, what's the point of me, adding to that? But then I thought, no, the Beatles were a big thing for me. They're part of my musical DNA. Part of me sort of growing up and starting to enjoy music, and particularly probably around about 1972. Had myself a paper round. I had a Saturday morning job, so I had a little bit of money of my own, and I was buying records, and I bought quite a few albums during that time. And the Beatles and John Paul, George, and Ringo albums were ones that I would always pick up, and I did. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through. The Beatles sort of non-Beatles albums from 1970 to 1975, and tell you how I sort of remember them from the early '70s, and what I think about them now. So you know, here they are. There's quite a few. There's a couple missing. Um, Albums that I haven't included are the more experimental John and Yoko albums, like Life with the Lions and Wedding Album. I won't be talking about those. George Harrison had a couple of electronic albums. I won't include those. And there are three albums that I don't have from this period, and two of them are Ringo albums: The Sentimental Journey and Boku of Blues, and one John Lennon album, which is Rock and Roll. So apart from that, I think I've got all of the non-Beatles Beatles albums from the period 1970 to 1975. So here goes. I'll try and do them in chronological order. And first up, it's this one, and it's McCartney. And this was released in April 1970. So, it preceded the official split of the Beatles. Let It Be hadn't been released at the time. And of course, it's on the Apple label, as just about all of these are. And yeah, I thought this was a pretty decent album. Um, tracks that I like on here are sort of Every Night, Mama Miss America, and my favourite track of all is Maybe I'm Amazed. And I think that that's among, if not the best, solo Paul McCartney song of all time. I loved it then, and I love it still. So, this is an album. I think it's a little bit patchy. So, I wouldn't say it's a great album, but it's an album that I enjoy. And even back in the day, I don't think I would say, oh yeah, this is an absolutely brilliant album. But as I say, it's always an album that I really quite like. So what have we got next? It's George Harrison, and here we go. His triple album in the box, All Things Must Pass. And again, this was released in November 1970 in the UK. And as I say, it's a triple album. So we've got this jam session, Apple Jam, and then there are two studio albums here. That's one, and that's the other. And of course, they're on the Apple label, but slightly different from the standard. So yeah, this was an album that I liked at the time, and I like it now, but I like it now for different reasons. So tracks on here that are really good is I'd Have You Anytime, If Not For You, which of course was a single. Run of the Mill I really like. Beware of Darkness. Uh, Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp, Let It Roll, and Apple Scruffs, which I think is a great little track, and I think there's a bit of a theme with some of the John Paul, George, and Ringo sort of albums. That there was a little bit of backbiting, a little bit of resentment about what was happening to the Beatles at the time, and Apple Scruffs is, one of those songs. I do recall though, at the time, I really didn't like the Apple Jam album, and having listened to it, again quite recently, I think it's really good, and possibly it's the best. It's the best of the three albums in this box. So there you go. That's All Things Must Pass by George Harrison. Right, the first of the Lennon albums, and this is John Lennon Plastic Ono Band, of course. There it is, and I can remember that this was an album that when I bought it, which probably would have been around about 1972, it really appealed to the rebel in me, the teenage rebel in me. Controversial lyrics, and it was great. John Lennon was my favourite Beatle at the time. So you got Working Class Hero, you got God, and Remember on here, and Love. Love is it's actually a great track. And for a while, this was an album that I played and I played and I played. I think I possibly played this one to death a little bit. But listening to it nowadays, I think these sort of the politics, with a small p here, sort of gets a bit wearing. So it's not quite as great as I remembered it, but isn't that the case often? Your tastes change and everything, but still a half decent album from John Lennon. Right, Ram. Now this is a great album. Paul McCartney's album from May 1971, and I'll show you the inner. There it is, and yeah, it's an album that I thought was really good. It doesn't really have a bad track on it. There we go. So, tracks on here: Uncle Albert and Admiral Halsey, Too Many People, or Monkberry Moon Delight. Monkberry Moon Delight, absolutely love that. I just love the sort of the rockiness of it, and yeah, this was always an album I liked, and at the time, it certainly wasn't my favourite McCartney album, but over the years, I've warmed more and more to this, and now I think by quite a way, this is my favourite Paul McCartney album. So this is Ram from 1971. Right. Next up, probably John Lennon's most famous album, of course, which was Imagine, released in October 1971. And again, this is a lovely album. Not quite as political as the first, Plastic Ono Band album. And I think the title track, Imagine, has really been so overplayed over the years that it's quite difficult to sort of really listen to it nowadays. At least that's what I find. I mean, the track that I like the most on here is Jealous Sky, and of course this Jealous Sky was a hit for Brian Ferry as a sort of tribute to John Lennon after he was tragically killed. Other tracks on here, what have we got? Give Me Some Truth, which is probably the most political of the tracks on this album. And then Oh Yoko, I really like it. I mean, I do find sometimes sort of John and Paul's sort of love songs to their respective partners can get a little bit wearing, but oh Yoko, I really quite like. It's a lovely tune. So there you go. That's Imagine. Right, Wildlife, album by Wings. Of course, you've got Denny Lane uh, playing on playing on this album, and it's from December 1971. And to be honest, it was an album that I never really warmed to greatly. It's got some good tracks on, but again, like McCartney's first solo album, Wildlife tends to be a little bit hit and miss as far as I'm concerned. Uh, I like I like Love Is Strange. I think that's a great cover version, and some people never know. I think it's probably the best track on here. Wildlife, though, the title track, I could never, I just could never get into it. There's something about it that really grated. That anyway, it's not a bad album, but not an album that I really sort of come back to a lot. And I think when I played it a few days ago, it's probably the first time I'd listened to it for quite a few years. But there you go. That's Wings Wildlife from 1971. Right, now we're into 1972, another Lennon album, and I've got to admit that at the time this was my favourite John Lennon album. I need to put my hand over there because there's a rather offensive racial slur. Um, I don't know what they were thinking, using the racial slur to make a feminist point, but you know what I mean. But anyway, it was 1972, and I think sometimes it's very difficult to sort of, you know, judge the past by the standards of today. But yes, really love this album. Again, it was the teenage rebel in me that was attracted to this. I've got to admit that a lot of the more specific sort of political songs, like sort of Angela, for instance, I didn't really know. I didn't really know what they were about. What the issues were. John Sinclair, but there's other sort of more close to home sort of tracks. Like of the Irish and Sunday Bloody Sunday, of course, about the troubles in Northern Ireland, and of course, John I think felt quite close to all of that because of his own sort of Irish roots. And yeah, as I say, I really liked this album at the time. I like it a lot less now, but it's still not bad. I suppose, Sisters Oh Sisters, quite a good track. John Sinclair, I like Attic State, and Sunday Bloody Sunday, I suppose, are the tracks that stand out. Now, as I say, this is a double album, and there's this, uh, the live sort of jam sessions, and I listened to this, and quite honestly, I found it a very difficult listen. That this is not great, and if it wasn't included with the album, I don't think it would sort of detract from it. But I'm sure there are people out there that sort of would really like that. So from the point of view of the sort of the younger me, thought this was the bee's knees. This was a fantastic album. The 60-something-year-old sort of me thinks far less of it. But again, I still listen to it. It's not dreadful. Right, 1973, April 1973. Again, Paul McCartney and Red Rose Speedway. And this is, of course, McCartney and Wings again. And there's a booklet in sort of stapled to the middle of the gatefold. And yeah, it's not a bad album. Again, not an album that that I would listen to again and again. I think at the time, uh, I thought again it was a little bit inconsistent. That up to this point, apart from Ram, McCartney's albums hadn't been sort of consistently good, and this is a case in point. Tracks I really like, I like Big Barn Bed, I like When the Night, and I like the medley at the end. But probably my favourite track on this is Single Pigeon. I just like the inventive sort of whimsy of the whole thing. It's an absolutely brilliant sort of little tune, And there's McCartney sort of imagining that the single pigeon on the railings outside his house is having the same problems with its girlfriend as he might have been having at the time, So yeah, this is not a bad album. It's not a bad album at all, and you know, it's great if inconsistent. Right, where are we now? Still in 1973. This is June 1973. That's another George Harrison. This is Living in the Material World, and again, not a bad album. So here we go. So you've got the material side of the album, and you've got the spiritual side of the album. So of course, more than any of the other Beatles, um, George Harrison's into sort of Eastern religion, and it sort of shows in his musical output at the time. And there you go. There's the album. This is the end. I quite like that in the sleeve. That's sort of quite a dramatic picture. So what's on this? Well, there's the title track, which is fine. Try Some, Buy Some. And now a song that I really like. I don't really remember it at the time, but when I listen to these albums again, I thought, yeah, that one sticks out for me. That's not bad. And of course, there's Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth, and then the Sue Me, Sue You blues. Another sort of quite sort of plaintive sort of song from Harrison. So again, I like this not as much as All Things Must Pass, but it's still a pretty good album to own. Right, now the only Ringo album that I've got, and it's November 1973, and it's Ringo, and of course this is the closest we got, wasn't it, to having a Beatles album again. All four of them appear at some point on this album. What I really like about this is the booklet in the middle, and I'll try and show you. So each of the tracks has sort of been sort of illustrated by Klaus Lorman, and there you go. That was what Have You Seen My Baby, which is a Randy Newman tune. Then there's a Photograph here, which was quite a big hit single for Ringo. And I do like this album. I've always liked this album, and I like it still. And yeah, it's it's got an awful lot going for it. So you've got 6 o'clock, which was a Paul and Linda McCartney track for Ringo. That's lovely. As Oh My, I quite like that. Again, I think that was a single. Devil Woman, not to be confused with the Cliff Richard song. Oh, You and Me, Babe, which is written by George Harrison and M. Evans. I don't know who M. Evans who is. I should have done my research into it. But yeah, it's a lovely album. I don't think it has a bad track on it. And you know, I can remember when this came out that myself and my friends were really talking about it, and we kind of had hopes that the Beatles were going to reform, that maybe, you know, all four of them would appear in the studio at the same time. But you know, it wasn't to be. But there you go. We have this though. Brilliant album. Right, moving on. Well, this was November '73 as well. John Lennon, Mind Games, and I love this album. Don't think it's my favourite at the time, but it's probably my favourite now. So you got title track, Mind Games. Then there's Bring On the Lucy, Free the People, Intuition, um, which I think is a lovely track. And then there's I Know, again, stand-up tracks for me. But again, an album that I liked when it came out, and on sort of re-listening to it, I think it's possibly the best of Lennon's albums. I'm sure a lot of you would disagree, but yeah, it's pretty good stuff. Right, now this is the album that for many years, for me, this was Paul McCartney's greatest album, and Band on the Run. So that's Paul McCartney and Denny Lane and Linda McCartney and various famous people just done a jailbreak by the looks of it. And yeah, it's it was an album that when it came out, I remember it got all the sort of accolades. This was McCartney at his very best, and I tended to agree with that. Although, as I say, over the years, I've sort of gravitated more and more towards Ram, but that's not to detract from this album, because this is a pretty good album. Band on the Run. So you've got tracks like Jet. I love that. Um, oh, Picasso's Last Words, Drink to Me. Um, Probably my favourite on here. And Mammonia. And you've got the title track as well. And it was pretty good. And I think with the reissue, people have been talking about it, that it's got Helen Wills. It's on the reissue, and I really, really don't think that track sort of belongs on the album. It's a great single, and it's a single that I bought at the time, but it doesn't belong on Band on the Run. So there you go. That's Band on the Run. Used to be my favourite McCartney album. Now probably my second favourite McCartney album. So we're almost there. Walls and Bridges. John Lennon with this sort of weird sort of thing. This is sort of like got various illustrations from Paul McCartney from June 1952 when he was 11 years old. Here's the inner, and yeah, you've got some lovely tracks on here. Whatever Gets You Through the Night. I like that. What else have we got? What You Got? Number 9 Dream, which is quite nice. Steel and Glass, sort of more of a sort of hard-hitting track. Excuse me. And then How Do You Sleep? Another song, sort of, that seems to be full of resentment for the Beatles breakup. But yeah, not a bad album. Never my favourite, but a nice album nevertheless. Oh yeah, there is another Ringo here. I'd forgotten about this. Goodnight Vienna. So this is Ringo inserted into a still of the 1950s sci-fi film, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and there's the back. Released in November 1974. Not a bad album. It's all Dada down to you. It's all right. Good night, Vienna. Yeah, only you and you alone. All by myself. It's not bad at all. It's got some pretty big names on here. I mean, John Lennon's on here, Elton John's on here, Harry Nilsson's on here, and Billy Preston. Well, Billy Preston sort of appears on quite a few of the sort of Beatles solo albums. There you go. So not a bad album, but not a great album. That's Ringo Starr, Good Night Vienna. Right, here we go. And this is a bit of Harrison again. This is Dark Horse, and it's on the there's the inside the gatefolds, and it's there you go. So that's that. So yeah, not an album, that I really warmed to too much. So what have we got on here? So Sad, I thought was quite good. And then there's a sort of well, not so much Christmas, but sort of a kind of festive song, Ding Dong Ding Dong, which I think he released as a single. It's not great. And then Dark Horse, the track itself. But yeah, it's not bad, but not a great album. So just two to go for me. So as I say, Rock and Roll was an album that I don't have, which was released in February '75. So you got this May 1975, Venus and Mars, and there we go. Yeah, I think this album suffers in quite a few ways. I mean, first of all, I don't think it's a particularly great album, but it followed Band on the Run, and I think people were expecting an awful lot more. It's got a single on here, Listen to What the Man Said, but I quite like Venus and Mars, and then there's Rock Show, which sort of leads on from the first part of Venus and Mars, and you got Venus and Mars reprise later on in the album. But tracks like Magneto and Titanium Man, what's that all about? It's not an album, that I particularly warmed to ever. Partly because of what had gone before, and it was a little bit of a disappointment. But it was the last McCartney album that I bought, and then the last album from any of the Fab Four that I bought was Extra Texture. And I don't mind admitting that when I first bought this album, I just didn't sort of like it. So I brought it home and thought, no, this is not for me. But having listened to it again, I think this is this isn't a half bad album. So you've got You, Great Cloudy Lies, and Tired of Midnight Blues. I think is a really good track. So overall, I think this is an album that's probably gone from nearly last, sort of right up there to my sort of top five over the years. So that was it. So after that, I didn't buy any more albums by any of the Beatles. So why did I do that, or why didn't I buy any more? Do you think I should have bought more? The main reason was that I was into other music. I was very much into T-Rex, David Bowie, Slade. I loved glam rock. I loved prog rock, and I always thought that the Beatles were really the music of another slightly older generation. It wasn't really talking to me. And then around about sort of 1976, John Peel on Radio 1 started playing this sort of new and wonderful music, which was punk rock, and I was absolutely hooked. I was absolutely hooked on it, and from then on, sort of the Beatles are part of my sort of musical sort of history. We parted our ways. Was I too hasty to do that? What do you think? Anyway, I quite enjoyed doing this, just sort of listen to these albums again. And yeah, so tell me what you think, and I'll see you next time with something completely different. So till then, bye bye.